The mountain air bit cold against Raven Mitchell's face as he stood on his cabin's deck, watching the stars dance across the Colorado sky. 10 years of solitude had taught him to appreciate these quiet moments, far from the prying eyes of a world that would never understand what he was. His fingers absently traced the strange birthmark on his wrist, a pattern of interlocking geometric shapes that seemed to shimmer in the starlight. The first sign that this night would be different came as a subtle vibration in his chest, a resonance he'd never felt before. Then the sky exploded into light. What others might have mistaken for a meteor, Raven recognized as something else entirely. The object's descent was too controlled, its trajectory too deliberate. Through eyes that could see far beyond human limits, he watched geometric patterns pulse across its surface, technology, not natural phenomena. The crash shook the mountains, sending a plume of snow and debris into the night sky. Raven was moving before the echoes faded, his legs carrying him at impossible speeds through the forest. The bitter wind couldn't touch him at these velocities, his body operating on principles that defied conventional physics. He found the crash site in a hollow between two peaks, the snow around it melted into steaming pools. The vessel was unlike anything in human engineering, organic curves melded with crystalline structures, all of it humming with a strange energy that made his birthmark tingle. But it was the sound that drew him closer, a soft, melodic voice speaking in a language that, impossibly, stirred fragments of memory in his mind. "Hold on," he called out, vaulting over a twisted section of hull. "I'm coming to help." The response came in that same musical language, now tinged with pain and urgency. Following the voice led him to what appeared to be the ship's control center. There, amidst the wreckage, he found her. She was humanoid but clearly not human. Her skin held an opalescent quality, shifting between pale lavender and silver in the emergency lights that still flickered through the smoke. Long hair the color of starlight floated around her face as if suspended in water, despite the planet's gravity. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold, they were like looking into the heart of a galaxy, swirling with points of light that seemed to reach into his soul. She was also dying. A crystalline shard had pierced her side, pulsing with an energy that seemed to be unraveling the very fabric of her being. "Don't move," Raven said, kneeling beside her. "I'll get you out of here." Her hand shot out, gripping his wrist where the birthmark lay. The contact sent a surge of energy through them both, and suddenly he could understand her words. "You must not touch me," she gasped. "The quantum resonance will," she broke off, eyes widening as she stared at where their skin met. Instead of the destructive reaction she'd clearly expected, streams of light were flowing between them, the birthmark on his wrist glowing with the same patterns that adorned her ship. "Impossible," she whispered. "You bear the mark of the starborn. But they were lost millennia ago." "I don't understand," Raven said, even as his hands moved with inexplicable certainty toward her wound. "But I think I can help." Energy flowed through him instinctively, his fingers tracing patterns in the air that left trails of light. The crystalline shard dissolved into motes of luminescence, and the terrible wound began to close. The woman watched with an expression of wonder and growing realization. "I am Astrid," she said softly, "Crown Princess of the Lacerian Empire. And you have just invoked the ancient rites of healing. Do you understand what that means?" Before Raven could respond, his enhanced senses picked up multiple sonic booms high above. "We've got company," he said, gathering her into his arms. She was surprisingly light, as if she were partly made of the same star stuff that powered her ship. "The shadows," Astrid breathed, her hand clutching at his shirt. "They must not find us. The fate of two worlds depends on it." "Then they won't," Raven said with a certainty he didn't quite understand. Something was awakening inside him, knowledge and power he'd never known he possessed. The birthmark on his wrist now glowed continuously, matching patterns that had begun to appear across Astrid's skin. As he carried her from the wreck, she pressed something into his hand, a crystal that pulsed in sync with both their markings. "The key of awakening," she murmured. I came to Earth searching for its partner, never dreaming I would find. The rest of her words were lost in the roar of atmospheric entry as 3 ships, black as the space between stars, descended through the clouds. They were hunter-killers of the Shadow Coalition, Raven knew, though he had no idea how he knew it. My cabin's not far, he said, already moving. But you'll have to explain a few things when we get there. Starting with why I suddenly know what a Shadow Coalition hunter-killer looks like. Astrid's starlit eyes met his. The healing bond has begun awakening your heritage, she said. You are not what you think you are, Raven Mitchell. You are so much more. And if we survive the night, I will show you exactly what that means. The night exploded into chaos as energy weapons lit up the mountainside. Raven ran, his feet barely touching the ground, while above them the hunters began their pursuit. With each step, more knowledge flooded his mind, star maps and battle strategies, the history of a civilization that spanned galaxies, and through it all, a growing certainty that his whole life had been leading to this moment. The birthmark burned like a star against his skin as he carried his precious cargo through the night, while overhead, the hunters circled like wolves around wounded prey. But Raven Mitchell had spent his whole life hiding what he was. Now, with Astrid in his arms and ancient power awakening in his blood, it was finally time to show the world, and the stars beyond, exactly what he could do. Raven's cabin was built like a fortress, though until now he'd never understood why he'd felt compelled to include certain strange modifications in its design. As he carried Astrid through the hidden entrance beneath the structure, ancient symbols carved into the walls began to glow with the same light that pulsed from their connected marks. Your instinct served you well, Astrid said as he set her down in what appeared to be a simple basement but was actually a sophisticated shelter. You built this place following patterns you didn't even consciously remember. About that, Raven said, activating defense systems he somehow knew how to operate, I think it's time for some answers. Starting with why I suddenly know how to work technology I've never seen before. Astrid's starlit eyes studied him as she settled onto a couch that adjusted to cradle her form. The healing bond between us has accelerated your awakening. You are Starborn, Raven. One of the ancient race that helped build the Lacerian Empire millennia ago. We thought your kind were lost forever in the Great Dissolution. Above them, the cabin sensors tracked the Shadow Coalition ships as they established a search pattern. Raven could feel them like dark spots in his consciousness, their very presence setting his teeth on edge. And these hunters, he asked, though fragments of knowledge were already crystallizing in his mind. They're after more than just a runaway princess, aren't they? The Shadow Coalition seeks to overthrow the Empire, Astrid confirmed. But more than that, they wish to unlock the ancient powers of the Starborn. Powers that now flow through your veins. She winced, pressing a hand to her side where he had healed her. Powers that are even now changing both of us through the bond we've formed. Raven felt it too, a connection between them that grew stronger with each passing moment. He could sense her emotions, catch glimpses of her thoughts. More than that, he was beginning to remember things he couldn't possibly know, the spires of crystal cities on distant worlds, the taste of starlight, the sound of space itself singing. The healing rite, he said slowly, it wasn't just healing, was it? A small smile curved Astrid's lips. Among my people, such profound healing can only be performed by one who is. She paused, searching for the right word, compatible. The ancient texts speak of it as a merging of essences, a bond that transforms both parties. Before Raven could process the implications of this, alarms blared through the shelter. The shadow hunters had deployed ground forces, sleek figures in armor that seemed to drink in light, moving with inhuman grace through the snow. They're blocking standard teleportation frequencies, Astrid said, rising to her feet with fluid grace. And their quantum trackers will find us soon, regardless of your shelter's shielding. Raven moved to a wall panel that slid aside at his touch, revealing an arsenal he'd collected over the years without fully understanding why. Then we fight. No. Astrid's hand on his arm sent sparkles of energy cascading between them. We need to reach the Temple of Awakening. It's why I came to Earth in the first place. The key I gave you, it's part of a pair. Its mate lies hidden in ruins older than human civilization. The knowledge unfolded in Raven's mind like a flower blooming. The temple in the heart of the mountain, he whispered. I've dreamed of it my whole life. Never knew it was real. It's real, Astrid confirmed. And if we can reach it before the shadows, we might save both our worlds. The question is. Her eyes met his, swirling with stardust and challenge. Do you trust me? The bond between them pulsed with truth and purpose. Raven could feel the weight of destiny settling around them like a mantle. I trust us, he said, and was rewarded with a smile that lit up her face like a supernova. Moving quickly, they gathered what they needed. Raven's enhanced strength and speed would be crucial, but Astrid's knowledge of Shadow Coalition tactics and her own formidable abilities would be equally important. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing moment, turning them from two individuals into something greater than the sum of their parts. There's a network of caves, Raven said as they prepared to leave. Natural tunnels that lead deep into the mountain. I've mapped most of them, but always felt drawn to explore deeper. Your blood knew what your mind had forgotten, Astrid replied. The temple calls to its own. She handed him what looked like a simple silver band. A quantum shield generator. It will help mask our energy signatures. As Raven slipped the band on his wrist, intertwining with his birthmark, more memories surfaced, star maps and battle strategies, the poetry of long-dead civilizations, the mathematics of reality itself. But most importantly, he remembered the feeling of belonging, of purpose, that had eluded him his entire life. They made their final preparations as the shadow hunters drew closer, their dark ships casting artificial night across the mountain. The bond between Raven and Astrid hummed with potential, ancient power awakening in response to ancient threats. Ready? Raven asked, offering his hand. Astrid took it, their fingers intertwining as streams of light danced between them. Together, she said softly. Above them, the hunters began their final approach, unaware that their quarry was about to turn the tables. For the first time in his life, Raven Mitchell knew exactly who and what he was. More importantly, he knew what he could become, especially with a star-eyed princess by his side. The hunt was about to become much more interesting. The ancient tunnels beneath the mountain thrummed with energy that grew stronger with each step deeper into the earth. Raven led the way, his enhanced vision piercing the darkness while Astrid's presence in his mind helped interpret the symbols that covered the walls, a history written in light and shadow, telling the story of how the Starborn first came to Earth. Your people were guardians, Astrid explained as they navigated the crystalline passages. They watched over developing civilizations, helping them grow while protecting them from threats they couldn't yet comprehend. Earth was one of their most precious charges. Until something went wrong, Raven said, the knowledge surfacing through their bond. The great dissolution you mentioned. Astrid's expression darkened. A faction of Starborn believed that instead of protecting younger races, they should rule them. The war that followed nearly destroyed reality itself. In the end, the Starborn sacrificed themselves to seal the breach their weapons had torn in spacetime. But some survived, Raven said, touching his birthmark. Hidden among humans, their powers dormant, their memories sealed. Until they were needed again. Astrid caught his hand, sending cascades of energy between them. The Shadow Coalition has discovered how to tap into the ancient weapons. If they succeed in their coup, they'll finish what the Dark Faction started millennia ago. Their conversation cut short as Raven's enhanced senses picked up movement ahead. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber where crystalline formations created natural bridges over seemingly bottomless chasms. And they weren't alone. Shadow hunters moved through the space like living darkness, their armor absorbing the ambient light. At their center stood a figure that made both Raven and Astrid tense, tall and elegant, with armor that seemed made of liquid night. "Void Commander," Astrid whispered, her mental voice tense. "One of their elite. They're able to manipulate quantum shadows themselves." "Princess Astrid," the commander's voice echoed through the chamber, somehow both beautiful and terrible. "And the awakened one. How convenient to find you both here." The figure's helmet retracted, revealing features that might once have been Lasarian but were now transformed by shadow technology. "Surrender the keys, and your deaths will be quick." Raven felt power building in his blood, responding to the threat. Through their bond, Astrid fed him tactical information, the hunter's weak points, their combat patterns, the way their quantum technology interfaced with reality itself. "Counter-offer," Raven said, letting Starfire dance along his skin. "Leave now, and we won't have to find out if your shadows can stand against actual starborn power." The Void Commander laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "You don't even know what you are, child. Your powers are just awakening. I have spent decades mastering the shadow arts." Dark energy began to coalesce around the commander's form. "Allow me to demonstrate." The attack came from all directions at once, quantum shadows that moved like living things, trying to envelope them in absolute darkness. But Raven moved on instinct, one hand raising a barrier of pure light while the other pulled Astrid close. "The bridges," Astrid's voice echoed in his mind. "They're not just crystal, they're ancient tech. If we can activate them." Understanding flowed between them. As the shadow hunters attacked, Raven and Astrid moved in perfect synchronization. Where he provided raw power, she shaped it with millennia of Lasarian knowledge. Their combined energy raced through the crystal bridges, awakening systems that had lain dormant for thousands of years. The chamber came alive with light. Holographic displays sprang up around them, showing star maps and energy readouts. The crystal bridges began to pulse with power, creating a network of force fields that trapped several shadow hunters in place. "Impossible," the Void Commander snarled, shadows writhing around their form. These systems were dead. The power sources were drained millennia ago. "They weren't dead," Astrid said, her voice ringing with authority. "They were waiting. For him. For this moment." Through their bond, Raven could feel the truth of her words. The entire chamber was responding to his presence, to the combination of his starborn energy in Astrid's Lasarian essence. They weren't just activating the ancient systems, they were transforming them, creating something new from the merger of their powers. The Void Commander's response was to launch a devastating attack, quantum shadows condensing into weapons that threatened to tear reality itself. But Raven was ready. The knowledge of countless battles fought across the stars flowed through him, combined with his own combat experience and Astrid's tactical brilliance. Light met shadow in a display that would have blinded normal eyes. The crystal chamber became a battlefield where ancient powers clashed with corrupted modern technology. Through it all, Raven and Astrid moved as one, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. The temple and trance, Astrid communicated through their link. "It's just beyond that far arch. If we can reach it, then let's make an entrance they won't forget," Raven replied, drawing on powers he was only beginning to understand. What followed was a dance of light and shadow, as Raven and Astrid fought their way across the crystal bridges. The Void Commander pursued them relentlessly, but with each exchange, Raven grew more confident in his awakening abilities. The birthmark on his wrist now blazed like a captured star, responding to both the ancient technology around them and the growing bond with Astrid. They reached the far arch just as the chamber's defenses began to fail under the Shadow Coalition's onslaught. Beyond lay another tunnel, this one lined with crystals that pulsed in sync with their combined energy signatures. "We found it," Astrid breathed, her star-filled eyes wide with wonder. The outer sanctuary of the Temple of Awakening. But they had little time to celebrate. Behind them, the Void Commander's laughter echoed through the chamber. You've led us right to it. The Shadow Coalition thanks you for your service. Raven and Astrid exchanged glances, their bond humming with shared purpose. The real battle was just beginning, and the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. But for the first time since this journey began, they both felt something new entering the equation. The Temple of Awakening was both ancient and alive, its crystalline walls pulsing with energy that responded to Raven and Astrid's presence. As they raced through corridors that hadn't seen footsteps in millennia, the very air seemed to sing with recognition. The temple is awakening, Astrid said, her voice filled with wonder. It knows the blood of its creators has returned. Behind them, shadows writhed as the Void Commander's forces gave pursuit. But the temple itself seemed to be helping them, sections of corridor sealing themselves off, ancient defense systems activating with each step they took deeper into its heart. There's something else, Raven said, new memories crystallizing in his mind. The temple isn't just a building. It's a key to something bigger. Through their strengthening bond, Astrid caught glimpses of what he was remembering. The Nexus, she breathed. The legends speak of a place between spaces, where the Starborn drew their greatest powers. But its location was lost. Not lost, Raven corrected, following instincts he was only beginning to understand. Hidden. Protected. Waiting for the right moment. They emerged into a vast central chamber that took both their breaths away. A massive crystalline tree dominated the space, its branches reaching toward a ceiling that seemed to open into the stars themselves. Energy flowed through its structure like sap, creating patterns that matched the marks now covering both their skin. The World Tree, Astrid whispered. The ancient texts speak of it, but I never dreamed. How magnificent, a cold voice echoed through the chamber. The Void Commander stepped from the shadows, followed by elite shadow hunters. The Shadow Coalition's scientists theorized its existence, but to actually find it. Raven and Astrid backed toward the tree, their hands clasped. Through their bond, they could feel the tree's energy responding to their combined presence, building toward something momentous. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Raven warned, power blazing around him like a corona. The Void Commander laughed. No, child of the stars. It is you who doesn't understand. Why do you think we've let you lead us here? Why do you think we've been pushing you to awaken more of your powers? With a gesture, the commander activated something in their armor. Darkness began to pour from the shadow hunters like smoke, forming patterns that were horrifyingly familiar. Those are Starborn equations, Astrid gasped. But corrupted. Improved, the commander corrected. Your ancestors were too afraid to use their full power. Too concerned with maintaining cosmic balance. We have no such limitations. The corrupted equation spread through the chamber like a virus, attempting to infect the World Tree itself. Where they touched, the pure light began to dim, replaced by writhing shadows. The tree is a connection point, Astrid's voice echoed in Raven's mind. If they corrupt it, they can spread their influence across all realities, Raven finished. That's what the Great Dissolution was really about, wasn't it? Not just a war, but an attempt to prevent this very thing. The Void Commander approached, darkness swirling around them like a cloak. Join us, Awakened One. Your power, combined with our understanding, we could reshape reality itself. But Raven wasn't listening to the commander anymore. Through his bond with Astrid, he was feeling something else, the World Tree's own consciousness, ancient and vast, reaching out to them both. The keys, Astrid suddenly said. Raven, the keys were never meant to just open the temple. They're part of something bigger. Understanding flooded through their bond. Moving in perfect synchronization, they each took out their keys. Astrid's recovered from her crash, Raven's found by instinct in his years of exploring the mountains. As they held them up, the crystals began to resonate with the World Tree's energy. No, the Void Commander shouted, realizing too late what was happening. The keys transformed in their hands, becoming pure energy that flowed into their joined fingers. The marks on their skin blazed like captured stars, and knowledge poured into their minds, not just of power, but of purpose. "We are the balance," Raven said, his voice overlapping with Astrid's as they spoke in unison. "Between light and shadow, creation and destruction, past and future." Power exploded from them in a wave of pure starlight, meeting the corrupted equations head-on. Where light and shadow met, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. The Void Commander staggered back, genuine fear showing through their perfect composure for the first time. "What are you doing?" "What we were always meant to do," Astrid said, her star-filled eyes blazing. "What both our peoples were meant to do," Raven added, the full weight of his heritage finally clear in his mind. Together, they began to weave new equations in the air, not of pure light or pure shadow, but of something in between. The World Tree responded, its energy flowing through them, amplifying their combined power. Where their new patterns touched the corrupted equations, balance was restored. The Shadow Hunter's armor began to malfunction as the corrupted power was cleansed from their systems. The Void Commander fought back desperately, but against the combined power of a fully awakened Starborn and a Lysarian princess, channeling the pure energy of the World Tree itself, even their mastery of shadows meant little. As the chamber filled with cleansing light, Raven and Astrid's bond reached new heights. They weren't just two people fighting side by side anymore, they were something new, something that hadn't existed since the dawn of time, a perfect fusion of Starborn power and Lysarian wisdom, of Earth's vitality and the stars' ancient knowledge. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance as light and shadow clashed in the heart of the mountain. But with each passing moment, the balance was shifting, and a new future was taking shape, one that neither the Starborn ancestors nor the founders of the Lysarian Empire could have imagined. The real question was, were both their peoples ready for what would come next? The World Tree's chamber had become a battlefield of light and shadow, but the tide was turning. As Raven and Astrid channeled its ancient power, the corrupted equations of the Shadow Coalition began to unravel. The Void Commander fought with increasing desperation, their perfect composure cracking as centuries of careful planning fell apart. "You don't understand what you're destroying," the commander snarled, shadows writhing around their form. "The power to reshape reality itself, to end death, to eliminate suffering." "At the cost of free will," Astrid countered, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of Lysarian wisdom. "At the cost of natural balance." "Some prices are worth paying," the commander spat, gathering shadow energy for one final assault. But Raven and Astrid were ready. Through their unprecedented bond, they could see the truth that both their ancestors had only glimpsed, the real purpose of Starborn power and Lysarian knowledge. "They weren't meant to be separate," Raven said, understanding flowering in his mind. "The Starborn weren't just guardians, and the Lysarians weren't just inheritors. They were meant to evolve together." The World Tree pulsed in response, its energy synchronizing with the patterns that now covered both their bodies. As the Void Commander launched their final attack, Raven and Astrid began to weave something entirely new, not equations of light or shadow, but of harmony itself. "Balance isn't about opposing forces," Astrid said, her star-filled eyes meeting Raven's. "It's about integration. Growth. Evolution." Their combined power met the commander's shadow assault, but instead of fighting it, they began to transform it. The corrupted equations were not destroyed but rewritten, their destructive potential transformed into something creative. The Void Commander staggered as their own power was turned back on them, not as a weapon but as a revelation. The Shadow Hunter's armor began to transform, the corrupt technology purifying itself as the new pattern spread. What are you doing to us?" the commander gasped. "Showing you another way," Raven said gently. "The way it was always meant to be." Through the World Tree's power, enhanced by their unique bond, Raven and Astrid began to broadcast their understanding to all who could receive it. To the shadow hunters in the chamber. To the Lacerian Empire waiting anxiously among the stars. To the hidden starborn descendants scattered across Earth, their dormant powers beginning to stir. The message was simple but profound: the time of separation was over. The ancient breach that had torn the starborn apart, that had separated them from their charges and led to the rise of the Lacerian Empire, could finally be healed. The Void Commander fell to their knees as the last of the corrupted shadow energy was transformed. Beneath the armor, their form began to change, returning to something closer to their original Lacerian nature while retaining echoes of the shadow's power, but now in harmony, not corruption. I remember, the commander whispered. What we were meant to be. What we lost. Around them, the world tree blazed with renewed energy. The chamber filled with holographic displays showing changes rippling across both Earth and the Lacerian Empire. Ancient technologies were reactivating, but differently than before. The barriers between worlds were thinning, not to allow conquest but to enable understanding. The Great Dissolution wasn't an ending, Astrid realized, the knowledge flowing through their bond. It was a cocoon. A chrysalis, waiting for the right moment of evolution. And now that moment's here, Raven agreed, drawing her closer. Where their skin touched, light danced between them, neither starborn nor Lacerian but something gloriously new. The shadow hunters were transforming, their armor becoming shells of light and shadow in perfect balance. The Void Commander rose, changed but not destroyed, understanding replacing hatred in their eyes. What happens now? They asked, their voice holding both wonder and fear. Astrid stepped forward, every inch the princess despite the power that now marked her as something more. Now we rebuild. Together. Not as rulers and subjects, not as guardians and charges, but as equals growing toward a common future. Through their bond, Raven could see that future unfolding, Earth and the Lacerian Empire growing together, the hidden starborn awakening not to reclaim their role as guardians but to serve as bridges between worlds. The world tree's energy would spread, offering both peoples the chance to evolve while maintaining crucial balances. It won't be easy, he said, thinking of the challenges ahead. Earth would need time to adjust to the knowledge that they weren't alone in the universe. The Lacerian Empire would need to transform from a hierarchy into a true partnership of peoples. The best things never are, Astrid replied, her hand finding his. Their marks blazed where they touched, a reminder of how much they had both changed. But we'll face it together. The world tree's chamber was changing around them, transforming into something that would serve as both embassy and teaching center. The shadow hunters, their corrupted programming cleansed, were already beginning to understand their new role as protectors of balance rather than agents of chaos. As the first light of dawn filtered through the chamber's crystalline ceiling, Raven and Astrid stood together at the heart of change. They were no longer simply a starborn and a Lacerian princess, they were living proof that evolution required both wisdom and power, tradition and transformation, roots in the past and branches reaching toward the future. Ready? Astrid asked, her star-filled eyes bright with challenge and love. Raven smiled, feeling the future unfold through their bond. Together, he said. And as they stepped forward to begin their new journey, the world tree's branches swayed in a wind that smelled of stardust and possibility, while above them, the first ships of a transformed Lacerian Empire descended through Earth's atmosphere, not as conquerors or mere allies, but as fellow travelers on the path of evolution. The story that had begun with a crash in the mountains had become something far greater, the dawn of a new era for two worlds, guided by the light of balance, understanding, and love.